most years, this parsha is attached to the parsha the week before. This week we're doing Parsha's Perkudei, the last parsha in the book of Shemos. And it's usually attached to the one the week before, and it's very similar to the one the week before. It means the one the week before talks about all of the parts of the Mishkan and the fact that the money has to be raised and the objects need to be donated in order to build this traveling temple in the desert. And this one is that now that everyone has given the money, Moshe makes an accounting, and it's put together, it's assembled, and it's finalized. So that's one of the reasons then is that most of the commentaries will comment about these two parshas together. And when you want to review it and to give a class, you have to sort of try to a way of separating the two, because it's really almost like it's a very continuous thought, which is why they put these two together most years. Why we do or we don't put these two together, otherwise, just so you know, is that in general how it works is that we want to be able to hit certain markers in the Torah at certain times. Like there's a certain parsha has to be read before this holiday, and a certain one should be read after that holiday. And therefore, in order for that to happen, and that we should get through the entire Torah in a year, we then have to juggle with the parshas in order to fit that. And sometimes what happens is that a year sometimes is longer than another year. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is if holidays fall out on Shabbos, so very often then we won't read the parsha for that week because we're reading the holidays piece. So that means that we're going to read it, it's going to be pushed off. So we lose a week. So now we're going to have to double up 1 week. On top of it, we also have a leap year. And a leap year in our calendar is not a day, it's a month. So it adds 4 Shabboses. By adding 4 Shabboses, we then now have to space out them more. So if you have it where, for instance, that every holiday falls out during the week, and yet it's a leap year, so then you have to make as many parshas as you can because you have the most number of weeks available. So then you take the weeks that are very often combined together, where you put 2 parshas together and you separate them. So this is an example. This parsha is usually read together with the previous one, even though it is independent. And this week we're going to read it separately. And because this year it's a leap year, which we're in the midst of it now. That's why we have 2 months of Adar. And the first month of Adar is only when there's a leap year. And that's why we don't end up having Pesach in the middle of the winter, because the lunar calendar that we follow is shorter than the solar calendar. So what happens is that every year we lose a few days, so to speak, in comparison between the two. So for instance, this year, if we didn't have a leap year, so Pesach would be in about 10 days. So, and it certainly doesn't look like spring when we had a whiteout this morning, right? And it's got to be, I don't know, so far below zero my mercury froze, I can't tell. So it's right, it certainly doesn't seem like Pesach, right? So, and last year Pesach was already pretty cold because it was a bit early. Then now this year we're adding the month that pushes the holidays from Pesach onwards back. So now Pesach is the middle of April, Shavuos will be in June, right? And we go through it. And then Rosh Hashanah, but this year was quite early, remember, right? We had it was like still the summertime. So this coming year, it'll be 4 weeks later. And that's a considerable amount of time. So that's what it does, and that's the effect on the Parsha. So but let's look at our Parsha and we'll deal with what we've got. So it begins with Eilu Perkudei HaMishkan, Mishkan HaEdus. It says this is the accounting of the Mishkan of the testimony, the Edus, and that means where the Torah and the 10 Commandments are kept. So the idea of Perkudei means it's an accounting. In other words, the commentaries tell us that Moshe goes through everything that was donated, and he makes an accounting. In other words, Moshe is one of the first people to have transparent accounting, right? So that, you know, when you give money to an organization, you don't really know what happens to that money after you give it. How much is overhead? How much goes to the person who raised the money? How much goes to the executive director? How much goes to the building? And then finally, after all that, how much goes to the purpose that you gave it for, right? So the idea is that a charity should minimize their expenses and maximize where the money goes, right? But you want to know. When they call you from the UJA or they call you from a yeshiva and they say, can you give us $100, how much of that $100 actually goes to the cause? Is it 99? Is it 5? Right? You don't know. Moshe says, you know what? The entire Jewish people donated gold and silver and copper and cloth and sheep and all kinds of things. We want to make an accounting of everything that was given so that people will know what happened to it. And it's an odd thing, of course, because you'd think it would be strange that people would think that Moshe might be a thief, that he has to make an accounting, he has to prove what happened to the money. You can imagine, like I'm doing an appeal now. I do every year 3 appeals, one before Purim, one before Pesach, and one before Rosh Hashanah, where I ask people in the community to give money to be able to support people in the community who need it. So Purim time, we have a mitzvah where you're supposed to give money that is given out on Purim for the poor. It's an actual, one of the mitzvahs on Purim is to hear the Megillah, and one of the mitzvahs is to give money. Each adult should give the amount of money of 2 meals, what it would cost for 2 meals, and you give that for the poor. So, of course, you can give that to anybody who makes these collections, but I ask the people here to give it to us, and then I take it, I give it out to all of the people in our community here in Thornhill who are in need that I know of. And that way the money gets out. So if you come to me and you give me $100 in cash, first thing is you want to know, did that $100 go in my pocket or that $100 go towards the fund? Because I took $100, right? So what I do is I make an accounting. Every single penny, every dollar that I get, I write down who gave it to me. Right, and then I have on my board, I show it to them so they can see how much money I got, and then I make sure the money is deposited appropriately, and then on Purim I give out the money, and I have one person that I show where the money goes. Everybody else who wants to see only sees that I gave out money, but they don't know who gets it. Just one other person knows who gets it, so that way the money is accounted for, because you want to be transparent. You want the people who give you money know the money goes where it should. Right? That's what Moshe is doing. Now, it says that the reason Moshe did this is because there were scoffers, there were non-believers who, among the Jewish people, who said, you know what, this Moshe, he should have no money. Why should he have no money? Besides the fact that people like to think rabbis should have no money, the fact is that Moshe, we know that when the Jewish people were collecting all of the wealth from the Egyptians, right, when they were leaving Egypt and when they were at the Red Sea, the Torah says that Moshe didn't do that. Moshe was doing mitzvahs while the Jews were all gathering money, and they were supposed to gather money. There's nothing wrong with that. So they should leave Egypt wealthy. Moshe was carrying the bones of Joseph, bringing him to Israel. And it says, that Moshe, he understood that it was doing this mitzvah was worth much more than the money. But the fact was, then he didn't have money, right? He had no money. So all of them are saying, they say, but look at Moshe. We know Moshe was a rich man. So how did he get rich? If he didn't take money when they left Egypt, he didn't take money at the splitting of the Red Sea like everyone else did. So he was a slave like everyone else. How did he get money? Where did all this money? Well, he wasn't a slave, but he was a Jew or a Hebrew living in Egypt. He certainly wouldn't have been a wealthy person. And if he didn't take money, then how did he get money? So they said, well, he must have stolen it. When the people gave money for the Mishkan, he must have stolen it. So Moshe said, these people are so foolish. They think I would do such a thing. Here I don't have money because I do mitzvahs instead of take money. I'm going to go and break the Torah in order to have money. Right? I could have just not taken the bones and had money. Right? So he says, so I'm going to show them. And he makes an accounting. So if you want to know the answer to the question, how is it that Moshe has money? Where did it come from? Because he was wealthy and he didn't collect the money. So and if he didn't take the money, he didn't steal, where did he get the money from? So the Medrash tells us that when Moshe had to go back up on Mount Sinai to make the new 10 Commandments, the new Luchos, so he went back up on there, and it says, Psalecha, it says, God says to him, Psalecha, which means engrave yourself. Take these stones and engrave the 10 Commandments on it. The first set of 10 Commandments, Hashem engraved. They were miraculous, but when Moshe broke them, they were destroyed. So now Moshe comes back down, and they're not as miraculous as the first ones. So the second ones, the stone was given to him by Hashem, and Hashem told him what to do, but he did it. Right? A human being actually took out a chisel and he took a hammer and he wrote out the 10 Commandments, which was different than the first ones. So God says, Psalecha, right? You should do this, engrave this. You should engrave this. But the Medrash says the word pasal, which means engrave, also can be understood as pasul. Pasul means waste. And what he's saying to Moshe is, when you engrave these stones, and each word in them, every one of the mitzvahs in the stones, you engrave it, right? There's going to be the little pieces that come off because you're engraving, right? Pieces are chipped off. You write a letter Aleph, you're chipping out from the stone. These are sapphires. Right? This is worth a lot of money. Salachai says that the waste is for you. You can have that. So he said that Moshe was able to take all of the pieces of the stones from the Ten Commandments for himself, right? And that's how he was rich, because they were worth a lot. So he had that, which the average person didn't get. So that's where he got his money. But the people who were scoffers, like everybody, you always have people like that no matter how honest somebody is, they're always saying he's dishonest. Usually when people accuse you of something, it's usually something that they do. Right? They see, if I'm dishonest, I see everybody as being dishonest. So therefore, if you want me to trust you, I'm not going to trust you, because I know I can't be trusted. So if I can't be, you can't be either. Right? So people who are not so honest accuse Moshe of not being honest, and therefore he did this accounting, which is what you have here. And he goes through it. Now, the next thing is that after Moshe puts together well, I'll tell you another thing, interesting thing about this first line. It says, Ele Perkudei ha-Mishkan, Mishkan ha-Edus. So it says, this is the accounting of the Mishkan of testimony, as is translated here. It says the word Mishkan twice. Why does it say, this is the accounting of the Mishkan? Or you can say, this is the accounting of the Mishkan ha-Edus. But why do you say the word twice? So one of the commentaries says that if you take the numeric value of Mishkan, the word Mishkan, right? You have a mem, a shin, a chaf, a nun. So shin is 300. Right? Mem and chaf together is 70, and the nun is 50. So that's 420. That's the number of years that the first temple stood. The first temple, right, in Jerusalem stood 420 years, and that word Mishkan is related to that. That's why it tells you the word Mishkan there, to say that the first temple stood that long. Okay. Then now ha-Mishkan, the word before it, so you add that one up. So that's again 300, right, and 70 and 50. 370 and 50. That's 420, just like the other one. But you have a hay before it. The hay adds 5. Right. So now you have 425. Right. So it says that the second temple stood for 430 years. Right now, that says 425. Why is 430? So the commentaries say if you add the number of letters, which are 5 letters in the word HaMishkan, to 425, you get 430, which is the amount of years that the second temple stood. So the commentators say, what kind of a thing is that? The first one, it's the numeric value. Okay, the second temple makes sense. 420 years it stood. The word is the same. It's relating to it. But when you want to tell me that the the second temple stood 430 years, but it only comes out to 425. So add the letters. You're sort of like playing with it. Right? But no, the Chassam Sofer says that's not the case. It comes out to be 425, and then you add the letters of the word, you make 430. So why 5? Those 5 letters? He says because there were 5 things in the second temple that did not exist. There were 5 things in the first temple that did not exist in the second temple. 5 miraculous things that happened in the first temple. And when the second temple was built, it did not have those miracles. So those 5 are in relationship to the 5 missing numbers. So you have now Mishkan and ha-Mishkan turn out to be the exact same number, right? The exact same number as the number of years that each one of the temples existed. And so we find a hint to the future temples. So one of the commentaries tell us that this is a hint that there's going to be 2 temples that will be built in Israel, right, as there was. The first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, the second by the Romans, and then the third one will come, and that's called ha-Edus. Ha-Edus means the testimony or the Torah that God gave us. And that third one comes when the Mashiach comes. And interestingly enough, it says that one we're not going to build. The first temple we had to build, right? The Mishkan we built using similar ideas. We built the first temple. King Solomon did that. We had the second temple that was built later on when the Jews came back from the story of Purim. And then that was destroyed by the Romans. And now what are we going to do? Now we're waiting 2,000 years for the next temple. And it says in the Gemara and the Medrash says that the third temple is not going to be built by us. That it'll come from heaven finished. It'll just show up on Temple Mount. Boom. Now that's if you take it literally. But it's an interesting idea, because if the third temple would come fully built and suddenly arrive there, we aren't able to fulfill the mitzvah of building the temple. Because the first temple right? We built. That was a mitzvah to build it. The second temple we built, there's a mitzvah to build it. There's a mitzvah to build a temple. So, but Hashem takes that mitzvah away from us because He builds the temple and brings it to us. So there's an interesting point. It says in, I think it's in the Megillah of Eicha, it says that the doors of the temple, it says the doors of the temple, right, from the earlier temple were never destroyed. When the Romans came to destroy the temple, they destroyed the temple, but the doors, the actual entranceway, that stayed. They were hidden. They sunk and they were hidden. So nobody knows where they are. So when the third temple comes, they'll be brought to the third temple, or they'll attach to the third temple, and it'll be finished. So what's the purpose of that? So there's an interesting law that says if a person is like going out on land and they want to say that this is my land and they build on it, it says that if they build a hut on it and it's just like a small structure, that's not proof that it's their land. But if they build some type of a building, even a hut, but it has a doorway, like a set doorway with a door, by putting the door on, that's showing you it's private. Right? Like here, like we have a glass door, so it's not really private. People can walk by and look in here. I can't do something in here that I can't be prepared someone to see, right? But if I would have a wood door and you can't see through it, so that I'm saying this is my private area. You can't come in here without asking me. Like in your house, you have a door in your house. Someone can't just walk into your house. They have to have permission. But if you didn't have a door, that's your way of saying, come on in. Like, that always makes me wonder why at a 7-Eleven, which is always open, why do they have a lock on their door? They never lock it. It's always open. But in any case, right, that a door is a sign that this is a private place. So that it says that the temple's doors were not destroyed, so that what will happen is that those doors have to be attached to the third temple. Since those doors were built by Jewish people, so then that's our way of building the third temple. So we can fulfill that mitzvah, because those doors will be attached to the next temple. Just as a side thought. We're talking here about the shekels. Right? It talks about how the Jews gave shekels, and we spoke about them earlier, and it's appropriate this week because this week is known as PARSHA Shkolim, the week of the shekel. That's what like every different Shabbos have names. You have the Shabbos Shira. That's the Shabbos when you say the song of the Jews going across the Red Sea. There's Shabbos Hagadol, which is the Shabbos before Passover. There's Shabbos Tshuva, which is the Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There's all different ones. So this time of year we begin 4 parshas that are always read before Passover. And Parsha Shkolim, shekel, is read now. It's usually read before Purim. And it refers to the half a shekel that every Jew was supposed to give to the temple. What it was is that every Jew who was countable, that means was an adult, would donate half of a dollar. It was a shekel, but half of a coin, right, like a 50-cent piece, to the temple for use on behalf of the community. So that you could buy communal things, like they needed cows and sheep in order to offer sacrifices. Where did it come from? So everyone donated money, and they had the money in the treasury, and the temple would buy things as they needed it for the upkeep of the temple, for the sacrifices, for communal things. Right? They would give this half a shekel. So today there's still a mitzvah of donating half a shekel, but of course we don't have a temple. We don't have that ability to donate it in the ways we used to. But usually now, on the fast of Esther, right before Purim, we put out these coins, special silver coins, which are worth half a shekel, and you come up and you buy them. Right, you buy, like, let's say I'll put out the coins on the table, and you come and you take, let's say, $5, and you put $5 down, and you buy the silver coins, and then you donate the silver coins back. Right? That's what you do. By now you fulfilled the mitzvah of giving the coin, right? And you paid your $5, and the $5 goes to charity. But you fulfill the mitzvah of half a shekel. So there's a lot of talk about the shekel and what the deal is with it, that it's so important. And there's a couple interesting points. First thing,
excuse me, just men can do this, not women.
Well, because the men were the ones who were counted on behalf of their families. That's correct. Also, children can't do it, and they can for education, but they don't do it.
We cannot buy the half.
You can buy it, but you're not required to buy it. You certainly can. Women do it. I see women do it every year, but there's no specific requirement. So the requirement is a man on behalf of his family. That's what the requirement is. So the idea being that you have this half a shekel. So there's two A couple of things to talk about it. Number one, it says that when Moshe, God said to Moshe, everybody has to donate this half a shekel in order to use for communal activities. So Moshe didn't. It says the Midrash says he didn't know what that was. He couldn't understand what is a half a shekel. So it says that God tried to explain it to him, and he still didn't understand it. So God took fire, and he made it look like half a shekel, and he showed him made out of fire. We have a few places in the Torah where he did that. Did it with a menorah. He didn't seem to understand what it was. So he showed him with fire, like a coin made out of fire. So he said, this is what it is. So you say that's sort of odd, because in the Torah they had shekels, right? It wasn't like a new thing. So if Moshe was not he wasn't poor, and he was raised in Pharaoh's castle, he must have seen a shekel. So why didn't he know what a half a shekel was? Well, it doesn't make sense. The second thing is why half a shekel? If every person has to donate, why isn't it a shekel? Right? In other words, I'm a person. I will give a full amount. Instead, I have to give a half amount, half of a dollar. Right? You want me to give something? Tell me to give $1. Right? Not that it's not enough money, but it's just a funny amount. It's not. It's like if you wanted me to give it, so then make half a shekel, and I'll give a shekel. But don't. Why half? What's the idea of giving half? So both of these things have significance to them. First thing is, when it came to the coin, and Moshe didn't understand what it was. It's not that he didn't know what a shekel was. He knew what a shekel was. He knew what a half a shekel was. But Moshe also understood that money can be a very destructive thing. People can have money, and it can cause them to feel, I don't need God. I have money. I'm rich. I'm smart. I work hard. I can take care of myself. I don't need God. And that's not true. God is the one who assists us by getting money. God is the one who makes that possible. And therefore, we need God. There's no such thing as being a self-made man. I made myself all this money. It doesn't exist. Right? But people think that. And because of it, they say, I only need God when I'm poor. But I'm rich. I don't need God. Right? So Moshe says, how are you supposed to take a coin and use it for something holy, like purchasing things in the temple, when money itself is so destructive, so negative? So God says back to him, he shows him a coin made out of fire. And what is fire? Fire, it can be very destructive. Right? Fire can burn down things, but fire is also very constructive. You use fire to heat your homes. Right? Keeps you alive. You use fire to cook food. Use fire for light. Fire has a lot of positive things. And yeah, fire can be very negative. If fire is left on its own, it can burn down your house. If you control fire, you can use it to do just many, many things. And it's a very helpful thing. And God's telling Moshe a message. Don't misunderstand. The money is not evil. It's not money that's bad. Money is not good or bad. Money is what you use it for. If you use money to take you away from holiness, then it's bad. If you use money for good things, giving charity, supporting people, helping people, then it's a good thing. So money in and of itself is not bad. It's just like fire. Fire is not bad, and fire is not good. Fire is what you use it for. So he showed him that. Plus, he showed him that when you give this half a shekel, you're going to get back more than you give. Because you're giving this, because I'm telling you to, the reward for your giving this is much greater than the amount of half a shekel. So you're getting back much more. Just like with fire. No matter how many, if you have a flame, you have a candle, no matter how many candles you light from that, it doesn't make the original candle any smaller. The fire doesn't get smaller. It's not like if I have $10 and I give everybody $1, I have $2 left. I don't have 10 anymore. But fire, I can share with everybody, and I still have the same amount. And God's saying that's the same thing with money. If you use money in a constructive, holy way, then your money, right, when you use it in such a way, what you receive back is much greater than what you gave. So you're not losing anything. And that was another message. The third message of why was that half a shekel rather than a whole shekel, and that's because one of the ideas of it is that we're purchasing communal sacrifices and communal things with this money. I'm not buying sacrifices for me. I'm not doing things for me with this money. I'm doing something for us with this money. And now the sacrifice that the Jewish people have to have, they have the money to do. Right? If I need a sacrifice for me, I'll go and pay for it. But if we need a sacrifice for us, every one of us pays for it. So the half a shekel, it shows you that I am not complete unless I'm together with another person. When another person gives half a shekel and I give half a shekel, that becomes one. That is to say, if I truly want to benefit the community, I need to realize that you have to have this unity. You have to have a group of people who are unified together in order to be one shekel, not two halves of a shekel. And therefore you give half a shekel to show the necessity of us getting together with other people for common purposes in order to do good. And if we don't do that, then all we have is a bunch of incomplete people, half shekels. Right, so that's another point of it. So when we give the shekel, we keep, the half a shekel, that's what we keep in mind in order to accomplish it. So that's what it's referring to when it talks about this shekel here. And then it goes through many of the different things and how Moshe assembled it. Basically what was happening is like this, is different people took upon themselves to donate different things. And then other people, or sometimes the same people, were designated to fashion them into something. Like you had to have a menorah, or a menorah is not a good example, but you had to have a gold table, for instance. Or you had to have walls made out of cloth. You had to have wool that was dyed. So you had one person would donate, let's say, the skins of an animal in order to make the wall out of the skin. Another person would have to treat that skin to make it so that it was like leather. Another person would have to hang it. Then after you had that person hang it, you now have all these pieces of the temple, but you have to put it together. Now you have to make the Mishkan. You have just all these pieces. So you had one group who would donate. Then you had some of the same and some others who would work on it, the artists. Right? Then you had the people who would come after that, and it would be put together. Right? And the goal was that God wanted the Jewish people to put it together. The fact is that they couldn't do it. They did have the money, and they did have the items, and they did fashion the items, but they couldn't put it together because you had to be superhuman. You're talking about an enormous building. These people didn't have cranes. They didn't have anything. And you want to lift up a side of a building, it could weigh 2 tons. How am I going to pick up that building? It's not possible. So they said, God told us to donate, we donate. God told us to make it, we made it. Now God told us to put it together, we can't put it together. We just can't do it. So they took it to Moshe, and they said, okay, you're the boss. You put it together. So he looks to God. He says, God, if the whole Jewish people aren't strong enough to do it, how am I supposed to do it? So God tells him, just try. Just put in the effort. So he goes, and God finishes the job. In other words, Moshe puts in the effort, and it wasn't possible for Moshe to pick up something that weighs 2 tons. But he goes and he tries, and he can do it. In other words, that God helped him. And so the commentaries want to know, why does God command him to build the temple when it's physically impossible? And the only way he can build the temple is that God has to do it. So why does God even go through the process? Why do you go to them and tell them, you build the temple, and then you make it impossible for them to do? Just say, get all this stuff, and I'll build the temple. Like, why do it in such a way that God has to make a miracle, where he himself is actually doing it, but it appears like Moshe was doing it, or the people themselves were doing it? What's the purpose of that? Why even do it in the first place? Just tell God, here's the pieces, you put it together. You're God, you can do it. So the point is that God wanted Moshe to understand that the effort that you have to put in order to build the temple is what I'm looking for. You don't have to accomplish it. That's not your job. Your job is to make the effort. If you put in the effort, then you have done your job. I'll do the rest. So it's physically impossible for Moshe to build the temple by himself. So God says, just try. I told you it's a mitzvah to do, so go do it. As soon as Moshe tried, God steps in and finishes it for him, because it's the effort that was important. And this is, of course, a very important message. While in the world that we live in, there's always the bottom line. And what's the bottom line? What's the results? I'm not going to spend all my time talking to you unless there's a bottom line. I'm going to make my money, right? What am I doing this for? But if God says in the spiritual world that's not the case. It's not the bottom line. What's important is the effort and your feeling. Why are you doing this? And the fact that you're doing it with your whole heart and you're making as much effort as you can, you've accomplished it. It says machshava tova mitzaref l'maisa. A person has a positive thought. Somebody who says, I want to do this mitzvah, but you can't do it for whatever reason, it's as if you did it. That's what it says. Because it's in your mind. It's in your intention. Of course, you have to do the action to the best of your ability, but if you can't do it, then you've tried. And that's what God's telling to Moshe. I know you can't build the building. Go out and do it anyways. And as soon as Moshe tries to do what God says, then God finishes it, to teach us that lesson. Like for instance, in schools, not as much in Jewish schools, or to some extent, but in the general world, the schools and businesses, everything is on the end result. What did you accomplish? You go to school, right, and you take a class, and the teacher says, "Look, I'm going to give you a test." So you know the answers to the answer to the test is whatever the teacher says it is. The teacher could be wrong, but you still have to say what the teacher said, because that's how they're going to mark you. You want the mark, because all you're interested in here is the end result, which is your grade. I want the grade. I want an A. Therefore, I'm going to respond to the teacher what they say the answer is, even if their answer is wrong, but it's their answer. So I'm going to tell them that. Everything is on the end. Right? In the Jewish world, that's not how it's supposed to be. In the Jewish world, you get a student, and you add that student, and you say, you have to learn this. Right? And that student puts every ounce of energy and intent and desire to learn it, and they can't. Right? It's as if they did. That we say that child, even though he doesn't have the knowledge, and therefore we have to find a way to get him the knowledge, should be judged not on his grade, should be judged on his effort. And the more effort that one puts into a sincere effort, that's how you should be judged. Same thing in our lives. Sometimes people call me up, there's a family that need help. Could you maybe help organize something for them, be it meals or whatever? And we say, okay, well, we will. And then I call up the family and say, oh, don't worry about it. We already have meals. Somebody already did it for us. You don't have to worry. Like this other shul did it. So I feel bad. I'd like our shul to do it, right? But that other shul did it. So okay. So the question is, right, is it? What do I get out of it? Here I'm all set to set it up. I'm all set to do it. I got people who want to do it, and I got nobody to receive it because they already got their food. So the fact is that the Torah says it's as if I did it. We all received the merit as if we did it, because we wanted to do it, but they didn't need it. Right? And that's a very significant thing. And that's why it says that Moshe had to put in the effort to build the temple, and Moshe had to try to build the temple, even though he knew he couldn't. So God would teach us this lesson, that the important thing is the effort you put in, not accomplishing the goal. We can't accomplish the goal, whatever the goal is, ourselves. We need to put in the effort to accomplish the goal. You can never tell for sure. Right? You own a business, you never know if you're going to make $1 million. You just know that you're putting in the effort. Right? When we do a mitzvah, I don't always know that the mitzvah will work correctly, but I put in the effort that it should. And therefore, in the Torah world, that's as if I did it. Okay, that's one of the reasons that Moshe received the Torah. Received all the pieces, even though he couldn't put it together. What else do we can say? Because most of the stuff that we have in here is simply what in the last number of weeks, it talked about making it, how you made it, and now they're telling you that they are doing it. Because what they did is they built the Mishkan. Right? Moshe in the end builds the Mishkan, and then he has to spend time putting everything into it. Because the Mishkan was brought to him really in Kislev, like around Hanukkah time. It wasn't Hanukkah, of course, there was no Hanukkah, but around that time. And it wasn't actually finished with the building and putting everything in until the first day of Nisan. So that means it was like December, and it wasn't really finished until April. But the building was erected in December. It just wasn't finished and everything brought into it until April, until the first day of the month of Nisan. That whole period was in between. And that's when all of this goes on. Everything is brought into the temple, and it's set up and is used in the appropriate manner. And it goes through a description of all of the different things that are put into the temple. One of the things that's put into the temple that we see here is the ark, the aron, right? The ark, or the aron, is a chest of drawers, and they kept inside of it the original Torah that Moshe was commanded to write, right? The original Torah. They have in it the broken 10 Commandments. They have the full 10 Commandments, and they have a jar of manna, of man, right? That the bread that came from heaven. That's all in there, and that's put into the Mishkan. Eventually, it's put into the temple. But in the Mishkan, whatever they have at this point, that would be put in. But if you read it, it's interesting in that when they measure out all the parts of the temple, they tell you, this wall should be this many amas long, like yards long or meters long, and this wall should be this many amas long, and this should be this high, and it should have this on it and this on it. And so it says, when you read the description of the wall where the Aron was, where the Torah was kept, right, and you add it up, it doesn't fit. In other words, like let's say the wall is 20 feet long, right? And it says then in the middle of the wall, right in the center, like at the 10 feet mark, you put the aron, right? So the aron takes up space. So let's say it's 4 feet. So it's in the center, so there's 2 feet on this side and 2 feet on this side. So now if you have 10, the wall is 10 feet, right? And in the center of the 10 feet is the center of the box. So you really only have 8 feet from the wall to the beginning of the aron, and 8 feet from this one to the beginning of the aron, because you have the 4 feet in the middle, the aron itself, right? But it says that if you were to do this, and then you'd take out a ruler and you'd measure the space from the wall to the aron, it was 10 feet. Even though the whole half of the wall was 10 feet. But the aron itself, right, we would have thought would make it only 8 feet because it already took up 2 feet. But the Torah tells us that the aron was not in the measurement. That is to say, when they would measure it, it would measure as if it wasn't there. So if it was if it from here to here is 10 feet, right, and then they put the aron down, and now you can only go to here, not to here, and then so therefore then from here to here is 10 feet. So you'd say from here to here is 8 feet, right? But except when they measured this to this, it was 10 feet, and they measured this to this, it was 10 feet. They're both the same. And it says because the aron eino min minyan, the aron is not part of physical counting. That is, the aron took up no space. It looked like it. You could see it. You could hit it. You could feel it. But it took up no space. So how is that possible? I have no idea how that's possible. But God did that so that it didn't take up space. The real question is not how it's possible. So why? Why do that? Why make a miracle that the aron would take no space? Who cares? If you need more space, you can make the building bigger. So what is the purpose of that? So it's trying to tell us that the aron that held the Torah, it takes up no physical space in that it is a spiritual object. Even though you can see the Torah, you can read the Torah, you can carry the Torah, you can feel the Torah, that's not really the Torah. The Torah is what's within it. Like it tells the story about one of the rabbis during the days of the Mishnah that the Romans killed him, and they killed him by taking a Torah and wrapping it around him, right, and then burning him. So it says that the students ask him, "What are you feeling?" And he says he sees they lit the Torah on fire, but the letters are going back to heaven, and therefore they're not burning the Torah. We just say, what does that mean? And what it means is that the Torah itself, Torah as we speak about it, a life force, the manual for living that God gave us as the basis of our belief, is not a physical object. It's the words, it's the knowledge, it's the spirituality within it that is what's important. The parchment and the wood has holiness because the words are on it. Without the words, it has no holiness. And therefore, the holiness is in the words. It's not in the piece of wood and parchment. And we're understanding then that's why the Torah takes up no space. The room, it takes up no space in the room because it's a spiritual thing. The words of the Torah take up no space. So it's sending you the message. You want to understand the spirituality of the Torah. The spirituality of the Torah is what's found within it, not the object itself. You don't pray to the Torah. The Torah is not a God. The Torah is simply the Word of God. And the Word of God is not the piece of parchment, it's the words. And that's what's significant. That's the idea of the spirituality, it comes from the words. And therefore, when you want to measure how much space it takes up no space. Because it's not physical. You look at it, you think you see it, but really it's spiritual. So God makes that miracle purposely to teach us that the object of the Torah itself is not what is the life force. It's what's found within it. The spirituality, the words, the messages, the hidden messages that are all within it are what's most significant. So that's one of the reasons it says that, and it talks about it here in this parsha. It also talks about what it calls the laver, which is a pot made out of copper. And we spoke about it before once. It was used to wash the hands and feet of the Kohanim. That before they would do the service, just like we wash our hands before we pray, the Kohanim would wash their hands and feet. Kohanim were barefoot in the temple. They didn't wear shoes. And therefore their feet would get dirty just like their hands. Now they're not washing their hands or feet because they're dirty. You have to make sure you're clean. They're washing them to sanctify them. In other words, now every step I take is holy. Everything I use my hands for is holy because they're in the temple doing sacrifices. So they're washing their hands and feet symbolically of this idea. So what it's telling us here is that this bronze pot, right, that they've got is used for that reason. So where does it come from? The commentaries tell us that when Moshe told them, we need wool and we need this, we need this metal. So it says the men went to the women and they said, we need this metal. The women said, well, we've got that metal. It's our mirrors. Our mirrors are made out of that metal because they shine and we can use it as a mirror, right? They didn't use mirrors like we have, glass with silver on the back. They took a piece of shiny metal, they would shine it up, and you could see a reflection, right? And using like bronze or copper, right, it has a nice tint to it, so you look like you have a tan, right? It covers up some blemishes on you. So it says that, and the Torah tells us, or Medrash tells us, and the Gemara tells us, that when the Jews were in Egypt, and Pharaoh made the Jews slaves, and they had a horrible life, so the head of the Jews, Amram, was Moshe's father, said, this is no way to live. We're not going to have children. Because if we have children, the children are just going to be born and be slaves. They'll live as slaves, they'll die as slaves. Why should we do such a thing? So we're not going to have any more children, which is basically the end of the Jewish people. Because they're not going to have children, they're finished. So they'll be slaves, and when these people die out, there's no more Jewish people. And he said, why would we do differently? You can't live, right? You can't live with yourself. I'm going to go and have a child, so that child should be born as a slave, live his whole life as a slave, and die as a slave. I won't do that to them. It's not right. No different than the people used to say back in the 90s and the 80s, how can I have a child today? Right? We have a nuclear war is about to happen. I'm going to bring a child into a world where someone's going to drop a bomb and everybody dies. I'm not going to do that. You heard that from people all the time. He said the same thing, right? And the women said, forget it. We're not doing that. Yeah, you're giving up hope. God says He's taking us out of Egypt. God says He's giving us the Torah. God says He's giving us the land of Israel. We have to have children, or there's no us. So the women said, we're not listening to you. So they went and they took their mirrors and they went out into the fields where the men were working, and they found their husbands, and they said, take a look at a mirror and look at me. Don't I look pretty? And it made their husbands desire them, and they'd have relations, and they'd get pregnant, and they'd have children. And so when it was the time to offer things, right, for the Mishkan, for the temple, the women wanted to give these mirrors. They'd say, look at these, we'll use these mirrors. You can make that pot that they wash their hands and feet with out of these mirrors. And Moshe says, forget it. What's the purpose of a mirror? A mirror is for vanity. You want to see how pretty you look. And it's vanity. It's not religious. That's not right. We can't use that. You're going to put that in the temple where you use a mirror to make yourself look nice so that you should seduce a man? That's not religious. That's not something that's holy. So God says, no, you're wrong. That was holy. Because the men gave up hope. The women said, no. God promised us this is going to happen. We are going to go out of Egypt. We're going to have these children. So the women said, we're not giving up hope. So they used the mirrors in order to get their husbands to give them children. That's a holy thing. They didn't use the mirror to say how beautiful I am for themselves. They said they wanted to get their husbands to be with them. So they said, look how pretty I am in the mirror. And they used the mirror for a holy purpose. So God tells them, no, Moshe, take those. You should use those. The women are right. And he took them and he used them, and they specifically used them to make this pot, it's like a bucket that was made out of the material in order so that the Kohen should wash his hands and feet. Because just like the women used their beauty to save the Jewish people, so too the Kohanim used their physical body for the Jewish people. They run everywhere they run. Everything they touch, everything they move has to be holy. So they used these mirrors made into this pot in order to wash their hands and feet, to show that. So that's the significance behind it. So that one should see. It's a very important message. So in the end, after Moshe puts together the Mishkan, it tells us that Moshe, it says Moshe wasn't able to go in because the presence of God was there. Right? It was God filled the room, so to speak. And then it says that there was a cloud that would go over the Mishkan. Whenever it was over the Mishkan, it meant that God was present. And it was that Moshe would meet with him. And it says that when the cloud would raise up higher, like not right over the top, but up in the air, it was a sign to the Jews it was time to leave. It's time to go to your next place, because they're wandering through the desert, right? They're going through the desert. God says, stop here for a day. Stop here for a week. You stop here for 2 years. Stop over there for half a day. Whatever it said, they'd stop, they'd make their camp, and the cloud would raise up. That's how they knew it was time to go. God would tell them, right? So the message in this, the commentaries tell us, is that when they came to a place, it's because God said, and when they left a place, it was because God said. That is to say, all of the comings and goings of the Jewish people were on the Word of God. That when it was time for the Jewish people to move on, the cloud would rise up and say it's time to go. That is to tell us that everything that the Jews had to do was from the Word of God. You see, the most of the world that we live in, they think that there's, I have my life and I have my religion. It's a part of it. So, I go to my temple, I go to my church 1 day a week, and I'm religious, and the rest of the time I'm me. Business is business, my family is my family, and religion is religion. And each one has its own part. And on Sundays or on whatever days that I go to practice my religion, I'm religious then, and on the other days I'm doing business. And they're separate. I departmentalize them in my brain, and they're separate things. And of course, this is not logical, but this is how most people in the world are. That they see it as a part of them, not as them, but as a part of them. And this is telling us that the Jews left when God said, the Jews came when God said, the Jews rose up to leave when God said, and they camped when God said. That is to say that everything that they did, whenever it was by the Word of God. That's a message to us, that you can't take religion and put it on a certain day and say, today I'm religious, tomorrow I do business. Right? Today I can steal and lie, and tomorrow I'm religious. You can't do that. Your whole life has to be imbued with ethics and morality that the Torah gives us. So that's not just on 1 day a week or certain times of the year. That's every day of our life. You never know when God's going to say, get up and go. Go, stop here, move over there, do this, do that. Everything we do is on the Word of God. It's not just at one specific time. It's a very, very significant difference between how the world looks at their religious observance and how we do. Right? For us, to say that I'm religious on Saturdays, but on Sundays I can cheat, is a total misunderstanding and total corruption of what Judaism is. But many other religions would not acknowledge that that's true. They would tell you have to be good all the time. There's no question. There's no religion that wants you to be bad. But the people who practice it say, today I will practice it, tomorrow business is business. If I need to cheat somebody, I cheat them. But when I go in and I tell the priest what I've done, that's then I'm okay again, and I can go back out and do what I need to do. We say no. Everything in your life has a tie, and it's true. If you ever study Jewish law in Hebrew is called halakha. Halakha comes the word holech, to go. In other words, halakha, Jewish law, is the way we go. How do you go? How do you walk down the road? Everything that we do as you walk through the road of life has a law in Judaism. Everything. And the purpose is so that you're always conscious of the spirituality within what you do. So when we get up in the morning, we wash our hands. I get dressed. You get dressed in a certain way. You put on your shoes. You get your shoes on in a certain way. You don't just put your shoes on the way you feel. If you use your left foot, your right foot, no, there's a rule. Like I'll give you the shoes as an example. When one puts on shoes, let's say you're wearing tie shoes, and I get up to put on my tie shoes. So it says I put on my right shoe first. Then I go and put on my left shoe and I tie it. Then I go back and tie my right shoe. That's not very logical, right? Put on your right shoe, don't tie it. You're going to put on your left shoe and tie it, then go back and tie your right shoe. So you're picking up your right leg, putting it down, putting up your left leg, and putting it down, picking up your right leg again. Like, why do it? So the halacha tells you that's how you're supposed to do it. Why? Because that's similar to tefillin. When a man puts on tefillin, he puts on his arm, then he puts on his head, and then he goes back and does his hand. So it's like right shoe, left shoe, and finish right shoe. So whenever I put on my shoes, you say, well, that's mundane. Who cares about your shoes? You say, no, everything I do has something spiritual about it. So God says, put on your shoes. That's mundane? Okay, that's mundane. So put them on and think of your tefillin. Think of something spiritual. Shoes are made of leather, tefillin are made of leather. Tefillin are put on this way, shoes are put on the same way. To tell you this message. Everything we do has a law. And the purpose of the law is to make us conscious, so that when we're thinking about spiritual things all the time. That's the basis behind it. So that is something that we need to keep in mind as we close this section, and the Jews are about now to go through the desert and to end up in the land of Israel. So far as they know, they're only going to be a short while. They're going to be in Israel in a couple weeks. We know, because we've read the Torah before, that it takes them 40 years. But their expectation is that they're going to get there pretty quick. And this is a lesson that they need to know before they get there, that everything you do has a religious prescription. Everything. You can't just simply take a box and put religion in the box, and you'll take it out on Rosh Hashanah and you put it back in after Rosh Hashanah. It doesn't work that way. So that's the message here. Well, we conclude the book, and we conclude our talk. Now, if you look here on 540, you'll see those three big words at the end. Chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek. Be strong, and you should be stronger. You should become stronger. Whenever we finish a book of the Torah, of which there's 5, we end with those words, strong, and you should be stronger, which is a blessing. It's a blessing. Where we finish this book, right? You should be, and because of it, you should have strength. You continue to have strength, and your strength should increase, not lessen. The idea being is that the Torah gives us our energy, our strength, our ability to perform, to live. It gives us the knowledge to know how to live. So when you finish a portion of the Torah, so the proper response is you should be strong. Use your strength of yourself to fulfill what it says here. Then you do so, and you will increase in strength, not decrease in strength. Like most of the time, the more you go to work, by the time you're done with work, you're tired, you got to go to sleep. But the Torah is telling you that on a spiritual level, when you do mitzvahs, they're physically taxing, some of them. They're hard. Cleaning your house for Pesach is hard. Right? I don't need to tell you. It's a hard thing. But it's what gives you strength. It's like, I talk to people about Pesach, and the big thing in our generation is going away to a Pesach hotel. And everybody says they want to do it, especially, some of these hotels are $5,000 a person. They're in beautiful locales. They're in Crete. They're in Israel. They're the Dead Sea. They're all over in beautiful locations, on cruises. And you're allowed to do it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But a lot of people that I speak to, they all try it, and then they find out that they don't like it. Because, and you know why? The opposite of what you think. The reason is because they don't have to prepare for Pesach. You can go and you can clean one room of your house for Pesach, one room, right? And then leave and go away for Pesach, and you're finished. You don't have to clean your kitchen. You don't have to go buy Pesach food. You don't have to restock your shelves. You don't have to clean up your whole house. You don't have to do any of it. You just clean up one room, and you sell whatever you have that's chametz. Then you go away and have a vacation. And people who say, well, that's, nobody wants to spend a month cleaning for Pesach. But most people that I speak to who tell me they went away for Pesach, the one reason they don't want to go away again is because they didn't clean for Pesach. It bothers you. It's an important part because there's a lot of meaning behind why we clean for Pesach. It's not just work. There's a whole spiritual aspect to it, and you don't have that. So the one thing you want to get away with, you don't want to have to clean for Pesach. I don't want to go grocery shopping with a crazy store, all those people all over the place. I don't want to spend all my time cooking. Right? But then you have a year and you go away and you go to this beautiful, Bermuda for Pesach, and it's beautiful weather and it's nice, and you have your Seder and you get up and you pray the next day, and then you have the whole day to take it easy. You don't have to cook, you don't have to set the table, you don't have to do dishes, you don't have to do any of that. And then when it's all over, you say it was a nice vacation, but it wasn't Pesach. That's not Pesach. Because there was no effort put in. The effort, that's what it says, chazak, be strong. The effort is the way that we express our spirituality. Right? We work at it. The more we put into it, the more we get out of it. And when you don't do that in Pesach, you miss something. I'm not telling you can't go away for Pesach. You certainly can. But I say, you mark my words. When you go away, that's going to happen.